I'm David Schechter. Today on Climate Watch, we're exploring the connection between wildfires and climate change. There were nearly 65,000 wildfires reported in the U.S. in 2024. In December alone, there were 9,000 blazes. And while climate change does not cause wildfires, science shows us it can make them more extreme on a planet that's getting warmer and drier. Today, we're taking a closer look at several recent wildfires that caused significant damage and deeply impacted communities. We'll head to the island of Maui in Hawaii, where a wildfire destroyed the town of Lahaina in 2023, caused by dry conditions and rising temperatures. The fires resulted in about $5.5 billion in damage and killed over 100 people. Then we visit Colorado to learn about a design concept called a passive house, where homes are being created with a powerful filtration system that may prevent wildfires from burning them down. But first, we look back at the Smokehouse Creek fire that burned through Texas in February 2024, and that fire burned more than 1 million acres. It's the largest recorded in Texas history. One family's home in Canadian Texas was destroyed by a rolling, burning tumbleweed.
They sent the fire trucks, and the deputies came out and forced us to leave.
The fire has left towns in ruin.
That's about all that's left in my bedroom right there.
Teresa Rankin lost her home of 38 years. It burned to the ground in the town of Canadian.
I got in my Jeep and I looked and saw that. I said, oh my gosh, this is not good.
There are at least 4 other fires burning in the Texas Panhandle, and they've crossed the state lines over to western Oklahoma. Texas officials say a break in the weather may not last long. Once the winds pick up, firefighting efforts will become difficult.
I don't want the community there to feel a false sense of security that all of these fires will not grow anymore. This is still a very dynamic situation.
Back in Canadian, Teresa Rankin says she's looking forward to when she can rebuild her home.
You lace up your shoes and you do what you got to do, and I got to have a home.
We move now to another wildfire that claimed 102 lives when it scorched the town of Lahaina on Hawaii's Maui Island. The people of Lahaina are still grappling with the effects of the fire over a year later. And it's not just their physical needs and necessities that have been impacted. 1 in 10 individuals has sought help for mental health. Jonathan Vigliotti visited the island to learn more about the mental toll that this fire has caused residents.
The physical scars remain. What you don't see,
it changed all of us,
is the terrifying mental toll.
The animosity, the energy, the negative energy, it's there.
Kia Kaina's downward spiral began when his father's body was discovered in the ruins.
He was found right outside the Maui Outlet Mall, right on Front Street, in his truck, and he had his little dog with him.
This is why remaining Lahaina strong can be so elusive.
I've had things sneak up on me and hit me a little differently. For a guy who was always positive about life, it put me in a little bit of a scary area where I would feel myself falling into the trap of suicidal thoughts.
Our CBS News team first documented this deadly mass evacuation days after the disaster. This was last August.
You could see the desperation and how these cars are lined up. We're talking dozens as far as you can see. There was so much panic as the fire hit.
Today, the cars are gone, but much of historic Front Street remains frozen in time.
It's surreal to be back, and it's surreal that so much of it does look the same.
It does. I think it's just a daily reminder of the trauma.
John Oliver is the public health program manager for Hawaii's Department of Health, making sure that people like Lynette Chun are getting access to mental health services.
The fire devastated me, and my mind was fractured.
How would you describe the crisis?
It's unprecedented. What we're seeing is grief. There's uncertainty, there's anxiety, there's depression. So we have whole families that are impacted.
When Lahaina burned, it was not just a community that was lost. This was Hawaii's ancient capital, its rich history, the way of life passed down from generations. 12,000 people lived in Lahaina before the fire. 1 in 10 have already sought help for mental health. Oliver estimates that number could soon reach 1 in 3. While there are signs of progress, including some businesses that were undamaged now reopening, much of downtown is still a landscape marked by trauma.
The people of Lahaina must come back. I think that is what everybody wants. And so Lahaina is not Lahaina without the people.
I have a little baby that was my savior.
Kia Kaina finally found the help he needed. It was staring him right in the eye.
She was the reason why I think I held firm, I held tight, and I'm still here.
Out of the fury that ripped so much of Lahaina apart, strong bonds are what's keeping this community together.
Up next, how the Eaton fire in Los Angeles disrupted work at one of NASA's most important facilities. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Los Angeles is usually bustling with scientists, but when the Eaton fire broke out earlier this year, NASA pulled their employees out of the mission operations room. More than 200 employees lost their homes in that fire, and Dave Melkoff spoke to those affected by the flames.
This is how you see NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory most of the time, a room packed with scientists talking to the stars.
It's weird to be in here without people.
This is how it looks today.
It is the first time in 60 years that we've had to pull people out of this mission operations room.
It says Deep Space Network. You're managing things that are as far out as Voyager.
Yes, beyond the edge of the solar system.
JPL director Lori Leshin was very worried about this place. Worried about her house, too, right in the Eaton fire zone.
We actually watched the hillside around us burn on our security cameras.
To show you just how close the fire got to JPL, we're going to split screen right here so we can show you the fire in the picture that Dr. Leshin shared from that night. It was right at their doorstep.
Here on lab, we have our own firefighters.
The NASA Fire Department was right in this fight, assisting other agencies, CAL FIRE helicopters snorkeling water from JPL tanks.
The DC-10s dropping all the retardant. You can see the pause check lines. They've been lying here on the hillsides.
This is the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab.
Yes, it is.
It's right in the middle of the burn zone.
We are right here, tucked up in the foothills. It was very scary. Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, we could see the fire very clearly from here, approaching the lab.
JPL's Ian Pinkham, a single dad, has been going practically non-stop since this began. His 11-year-old daughter is staying with friends.
I got to see her for about an hour 2 days ago. I snuck out and went and gave her a hug. I think that's the longest hug I've ever gotten back from her. Wasn't easy to turn around and say, it's okay, I'll see you in a couple days.
He was here, keeping JPL safe. They were very concerned at that point.
Yes, absolutely. We were meeting at that point and
thinking that you were going to lose buildings, maybe.
Yeah, preparing for an eventual fire, yeah.
Deputy Director Leslie Livesay was one of more than 200 JPL employees whose home is now gone.
You lived somewhere for 21 years. You know, my niece lived with me, and so there were a lot of memories there, family visits.
She says it's likely no other employer has lost more in Altadena.
Certainly JPL, Caltech combined are likely the largest employer in the area with losses.
Through all of this, no work has stopped. More than 40 spacecraft out there are still talking back to Earth. This room is how the universe understands its nature. But it was nature that brought heartbreak to Altadena and the space lab next door.
We are very strong. You know, JPL is a very tight organization. We will come together, and this community together with, you know, outside resources will rebuild, and we will be fine.
In Los Angeles, nearly 80,000 people had to evacuate their homes when the Palisades fire raged through residential streets. Homeowner Patty Phillips' car got stuck on a boulder as she tried to escape the flames, afraid her tires would melt and stranding her. Phillips laid on her horn to draw attention while calling 911 for help. One firefighter was brave enough to come to her rescue, as she told KCAL's Michelle Geely.
I thought I was going to die. I was praying to God to let me die from smoke inhalation, and please don't let me be burned alive.
To try and save her life, Malibu's Patty Phillips raced down the hill in Big Rock, blinded by thick smoke and surrounded by fire. Her dog Coda was in the car by her side, but she only got so far.
And I turned on Big Rock, and then the flames came at me everywhere, like a blast of flames and smoke. And I was blinded, and it's total vertigo. You can't see your road. You can't see in front of you. So as I drove up, all of a sudden I'm hitting these rocks, and I stopped my car. And I realized I'm not on our road. So I put it in reverse, which saved my life because I hit that boulder. If I hadn't hit that boulder, I would have rolled down the gully into the fire.
Unaware her car was stuck on a boulder, Phillips called 911, panicked and crying for help. The car would not move. She was trapped. Phillips says she was transferred to another dispatcher who explained getting to her was unlikely. Making things even scarier, Phillips had been separated from her husband James, who'd already made it safely down to PCH. As she prayed for survival, she sent these heartbreaking texts to him. I love you. I'm in big trouble. I'm stuck. I don't know where I'm at. My car won't move. The fire, and the text ends there.
Phillips was worried the tires on her car would melt. Fire and smoke was all around her. She wasn't leaving without her dog. So she laid on her horn, honking to make noise. Patty Phillips told herself, I'm not giving up.
While this is all going on, my husband's down on PCH begging firemen to rescue me. And they're like, we won't go up there. It's too dangerous. And he finds a fireman named Malcolm, big guy. And he said to my husband had him by the collar, say, please save my wife. And Malcolm says, let's go. And he goes up and he goes, we might not make it, but we'll try.
About a half hour later, Phillips sees a fire truck coming toward her through the black smoke. It was her husband and the firefighter.
I go, thank you for saving me. Thank you for saving me. He goes, we still might die. He goes, we're not out of danger. He goes, we still have to get past this fire. And he made it, but he risked his life to save mine. Like, that is a brave man, and he needs a hug from me. He needs to receive an honor like nobody else would come.
Only half a degree difference in temperature can increase the severity of wildfires. Climate scientist Daniel Swain recently published an article just before the Los Angeles wildfires, and he found 2 years of a wet climate followed by a dry year can lead to intense wildfires. His work has garnered attention from around the country.
A good place to start would be, what is the connection between the Los Angeles fires that were so destructive and climate change?
We know that there's a clear connection to the climate conditions that occurred leading up to the fires. Specifically, there's really two parts here that were important as part of a broader 1-2 punch leading to this increased fire risk. The first were very wet conditions, a bit ironically, in the 2 years leading up to the fires, which resulted in unusually abundant growth of grass and brush, which was the primary kind of vegetation that burned in these fires. And then an exceptionally warm and dry period that followed, which dried out all of that extra grass and brush to critically dry levels during the peak of what's known as offshore wind season. So that time of year in Southern California when these strong, dry winds blow from land to sea.
And those are both kind of climate-related impacts or drivers?
So we know that climate change has increased the likelihood of exceptionally dry vegetation conditions brought about mainly by rising temperatures and increasing atmospheric thirstiness. So literally the propensity of air to evaporate water from the landscape and therefore from vegetation, making it more flammable. But in Southern California, this specific sequence of events, there's also some evidence that these transitions from very wet conditions to very dry conditions at precisely the time of year when these strong winds are most likely to occur has increased. And so we are seeing more extreme fire weather conditions in Southern California right into the heart of winter, which is exactly when these fires occurred.
Is that a pattern that's more different, but more broadly relevant to the rest of the country?
There is something about this that's a little bit unique to places that have strong, dry winds in winter, but the broader principles apply more generally. This notion that in a warmer climate, the driest dries become even drier, driving more flammable vegetation and more intense wildfires. And this is particularly a concern in places that do see these seasonal bursts of strong winds, because when that dry vegetation becomes even drier and increasingly overlaps with whatever that strong wind season might be in a particular location, that's often where we've seen the greatest increase in wildfire risk thus far.
I think we have just a few seconds left. What are some ways to adapt or reduce the risks of these fires that are driven by climate change?
While we know that climate change is a key factor in what happened this time and in the general increase in wildfire risk broadly, it certainly isn't the only factor at play. And in Los Angeles, we really saw the effects of what happens when neighborhoods aren't really built for the high fire risk conditions in which they exist. And so one of the most important things moving forward, I think, is pretty clear at this point, which is to think carefully about building fire-resistant structures and fire-resistant communities in an era when we know that the risks of these kinds of extreme fires is only going to increase further.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Up next, how the California wildfires are exacerbating the state's housing crisis. Before the devastating wildfires tore through Los Angeles, the city needed to build 450,000 units to meet growing demand. Now the number of houses available has decreased dramatically after more than 11,000 burnt to the ground. Tom Hansen has more on how those fires have compounded the problem.
Have you had a chance to let yourself process or grieve?
No. I can't afford it.
Grief isn't the only thing out of reach for Ariel Hall, who was thrown into a real estate market as hostile as the flames that tore through her Altadena duplex.
Have you looked at Zillow?
No.
Or anything like that?
No. Knowing the challenge I'm going to have, and we won't be living in a safe area or a place that has grass.
Hall and her 12-year-old Jade escaped their home, where the single mom paid more than $1,000 below market value.
I make $3,700 a month. And the average two-bedroom is $2,500, $2,800. It's unrealistic.
As the smoke clears, the scale of loss is coming into focus. 12,000 homes gone. Even before the fires, Los Angeles needed to build 450,000 affordable housing units to meet demand. On average, a new apartment building takes 4 years to build.
Oh my God.
Those were the only 3 words realtor Robin Walpert could utter as we drove with her to see her neighborhood in the Pacific Palisades for the first time.
This is a housing crisis on top of a housing crisis.
97% of LA households can't afford the mortgage for the area's average home price, nearly $1 million.
Is there anything the city can do?
We're maxed right now. It's over-congested, under-inventoried, if that's a word, and it's, this is crazy to see.
And I've been homeless before, so it's so triggering to have vowed to myself I'll never have us in this kind of situation again. So we're just desperately looking for permanent housing.
In search of a house to make a home.
We end today in Superior, Colorado, a town destroyed by the Marshall Fire in 2021, the worst in Colorado history, destroying over 1,000 homes and claiming 2 lives. A new design concept called Passive House may prevent fires from burning a home down from the inside out. I learned more about these homes' impressive fire resiliency.
You want a little bit of yogurt, bud?
It's hard to miss that 4-year-old Alex Ela is enjoying having a news photographer visit his new house. It's nice to have something to smile about.
The fire was 2 days before his first birthday.
Let's go. We're gonna go now, we're going.
A wildfire is still tearing through Boulder County.
The Marshall Fire was the worst in Colorado history. Eric Ela's family lost their home, 2 cats, and have lived in 4 places in 3 years.
It's like, are we going to the new home or we're going back to the new home? I was like, no, this is the home. Yeah. We're home now.
We're staying.
Yeah.
When it came time to rebuild in their town of Superior, where new construction is everywhere, the Elas chose a design concept called passive house. It behaves different in a fire than a traditional house, where embers get sucked inside through roof vents. It's one of the reasons why we've seen homes in Los Angeles burning from the inside out, something the passive home seeks to prevent.
There's very few places for an ember to get caught.
Johnny Rizvani, who supplies materials for passive homes, is telling us, compared to the roof vents on most houses, this house has just a single air intake, and inside a powerful filtration system that controls the flow of air, keeping the embers out.
As opposed to most homes, you've got a lot of different vents for a lot of different purposes.
This has one.
This has one intake. And in an extreme weather situation, what you would do if you had to evacuate is you would close off that intake.
This home in Los Angeles, the only one still standing in its neighborhood, followed similar building principles. But the challenge for some homeowners is the cost. It can be up to 7% more to build a home like this, and that might be one reason why just 6 of the 300 homes that have been rebuilt in this town are passive. But there is another way that the state of Colorado is dealing with this on a much larger scale, and that's a new state law.
Right away, I was shocked that we don't require building standards.
Lisa Cutter is a Democratic state senator.
Why was that surprising to you?
If your house isn't well protected and you don't do everything you can and mitigate for fire around the property, et cetera, then you're putting your neighbor's house at risk.
In Colorado, more than 1 million structures are built in places that meet or mix with natural areas where there's a threat of wildfire. Across the U.S., it's 48 million homes, or a third of all housing. Cutter pushed for the creation of Colorado's Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. It will identify areas with the highest wildfire threats and, for the first time, enforce mandatory wildfire construction codes.
People should be building in a way that's appropriate for the environment they live in.
When you think about climate change, do you feel like you need to be prepared for things that are worse than you ever thought they were going to be?
I mean, we've experienced something that I never thought you'd experience, and I'm ready for it to happen again.
Across the West, the time has come for some people to rethink how they live with fire and how they rebuild from it.
For more stories like these and live coverage of breaking news, stream us right here on CBS News 24/7, available across all platforms. Thanks for watching Climate Watch. I'm David Schechter.